Welcome to another edition of People Over Politics. We appreciate having new guests, and this week we have a new guest. Of course, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I just want to start off with that. Before we get out there, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers because we wouldn't be here without you. And with that being said, thanks for joining us, Reverend Hughes.
Honored to be here, Councilman. Honored to be here, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yes, for sure. And so, for people who don't know about you, tell them a little bit about yourself. I know you run a church in the Laurel area, but definitely tell people a little bit more about you and your church.
Yeah, man. So, in terms of me as a person, I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia. Graduate of Hampton University for undergrad. Graduate of Princeton, their seminary, the theological seminary, for my Master's of Divinity. Been pastoring now in totality. Been doing work as a pastor for about 10 years. Started out after leaving Princeton in Philadelphia. Was really fortunate and blessed to pastor an incredible congregation there called the Church of the Redeemer Baptist in Philly. And left there to come back to this area, served under my father in ministry for a while at Reed Temple AME Church. That was Pastor Washington, towards his retirement, and was with him for his final 2 years of ministry, or final 3 years, whatever it was. And then out of that, had an opportunity to plant New Life Church. And that is where we are now in Laurel. Co-founded it, and so we are just growing and thriving. Very grateful. We stepped out on faith during a pandemic, which is kind of crazy, but turned out to be an incredible blessing. And the Laurel community has been phenomenal. We really feel called to the area. The congregation is growing. I love the fact that we are a diverse congregation in terms of age and background. When you come to our church on a Sunday morning, you'll see folks suited and booted. And then right next to them, you'll see brothers and sisters with the coolest shoes on, with a pair of J's and some jeans and what have you. So very proud of that and grateful that we're reaching really generations under one roof, and really serious about giving back to the community as a church. We want to be not just in the community. We want to be a part of the community and partner with the community. We believe that's the best way for ministry to take place. And so really grateful for opportunities to just continue to link with those who are already doing work in Laurel, who have done it for years, such as yourself. Really started to find out a lot about the work that you were doing around rent stabilization. Incredible work in the area. So thank you for that work. That kind of got our attention. We also were aware of some of the work that you were doing around the safe harbor bill in the state of Maryland, and that was a critical.
Next week, yeah. Next week is the bill signing.
Yeah, that was critical for us as well. So we were grateful. I think we contributed a few hundred signatures actually towards getting that bill passed when it was still being fought for by you and several others in the community. So, man, just trying to get in and serve God and serve people, and blessed to be able to do so. I don't know if is that enough.
No, that's a great introduction. A lot to go off of, right? And so, a couple things you highlighted. I appreciate, the big ups for the rent stabilization and the tenant protection organizing. There's still a lot of work to be done, but there's been a lot of leeway had in this last year, right? There's been bills passed at the county level, bills passed in other cities, and people are a lot more aware of what rights they have. And that's always important. And another thing you brought up was a safe harbor bill. For anybody who doesn't know, Reverend Leslie DeWhite, she is a fighter. She, made me aware and wrote me in on this issue, I will say. But, we worked together on several legislative issues. And she's a fighter. She's an organizer. And next Tuesday is the bill signing. And so I will tell you, yes, clap it up, because there was a point in time during the session where, there was still a lot of support, thousands. I think there was thousands of signatures. So I'm glad you guys got hundreds, but I think by the end there was several thousands, and we still weren't sure if the bill would pass. Wow. Right? Like there was still questions in the Senate if it's going to pass the Senate. And Reverend Leslie, she calls me and we're game planning and she's working behind the scenes. That's why I've given her, big props because, she definitely took this one and made it her baby. And so big props there. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I'm sure everybody out there, always has this question, like, do you feel that you have more latitude to advocate and to be non-traditional because you're non-denominational? And absolutely right.
Okay. Yeah, no, I that's so interesting. I think I've been a part of a denomination before. I pastored a church that was Baptist, and now being non-denom, there definitely is more freedom. I want to say there are churches within every denomination that simply choose to dare to be different, and you see that whether you're looking at Methodist or the AME Church or whoever you look at, even in the area. But I do believe that being free is not necessarily about the denominational affiliation. It's more about the mindset that you bring to ministry. And it's more about your willingness to push whatever envelope it is that you're in.
Okay.
To make sure that what you're doing is advocating for ministry not being done according to tradition, according to what has been done, but doing ministry in a way that's relevant to where people are, relevant to people's needs, that ministry is intelligible.
Sure.
That ministry is accessible, and that ministry is meaningful.
Of course.
And I think that if you are making those priorities, then no matter what denomination it is that you find yourself within, you'll be able to find the freedom that you need in order to do the work that needs to be done. And so it's really about, I think, locking in on that mentality and that approach. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and the reason I ask, I'll throw this out there, right? Not in a non-denominational, this is just a segue, but every time I go to church, I feel like the message is for me, right? Like when I came that day, whatever message was going on was what was going on in my life, right? Like it happened to be that way by divine intervention, right? But a segue, I had a conversation with two people who were very in the church. I think one is a pastor, a reverend, and I think, so there is a difference of like 501c3 and 501c4. And so, one person said that I believe that the churches need to get back in the streets, meaning like she basically meant from her perspective that, a lot of these churches need to be more political and, take positions and, not just be at the altar, right? And go out into the community. And so, I guess the other gentleman, and he was basically like, well, some of us are 501c3, some of us are 501c4, and so like it's the difference of like it's the difference of separation of church and state, right? So I guess to some degree there are restrictions on what they can do politically, so I know that that's kind of some nuances that people don't understand or know, but
yeah, no, I think so. For me, I believe there's a couple of things. The church to me is not a building. The church is a group of people. It is a group of people. If you were looking at it from a scriptural standpoint, it's the body of Christ. It is believers. It are people who believe in Christ, who believe in Jesus, who follow a certain faith tradition. So the church is the people, not the place. That's the first thing. Once you lock in on the fact that the church is the people and not the place, then wherever the people are is wherever the church has to be, because the church is the people. And so if people are struggling for rights in their workplace, the church has to also be a part of that struggle, because the church is the people. If people are struggling, for example, we may reference to rent stabilization. If people are struggling because folks are taking advantage of their ability to control rent in a way that is not healthy and in a way that is downright harmful, then we have to be involved in that, because the church is for the people. When it was we recognized that there was a huge challenge even within the Laurel community in certain places with food disparity.
Sure.
And so one of the things that we do as a church is we've partnered with Oakland's elementary school, local elementary school in Laurel. They've been our adopted elementary school. And every month we're there and we feed some over 150 families for a week with fresh produce, because we found out that people in the community have need. And so the church is there for the people. We found out during the pandemic when gas prices, I don't know if you remember, pandemic hits, gas prices were soaring for a minute, $7. Everybody was like, what in the world is going on? So we did a free gas giveaway where we just poured gas into the cars of the first 100, I think what 100 or 200 cars that came through. So we do that work because the church is the people. And so if people struggle, then the church has to inherently be a part of that struggle. Now, there are some boundaries that legally we have to be mindful of. Obviously, when it comes to endorsing certain political parties, and then downright endorsing certain folks due to their political party affiliation exclusively, and not talking about their agenda, but talking about their party affiliation. There's some things that we have to be mindful of for those organizations that are 501c3s, because there is that separation of church and state, and we have to make sure we walk those legal lines. But for me, I always believe intrinsically that the church has to be where people are, because the church is people and the church therefore is for people. I would even say this. I think that there would not be a civil rights movement. There would have never been a civil rights movement in this country had it not been for the church, particularly the Black church, because there were a group of leaders, spiritual leaders, who recognize that our call is to stand in solidarity with the least of these, with the marginalized, and with the oppressed. This is the work that certain scholars like James Cone gave their life to, developing theology around this. And so when you saw the work of Martin King and others who were active during that time, what you saw was the church recognizing that our place is with the people. I think what some people have locked in on is that in some places, in some churches, I don't like the generalization that people sometimes make when they talk about the church. They talk about the church like they talk about Africa, like, it's like one thing, and not recognizing that, man, dude, like I've served at a church in Ghana, and I've spent time in South Africa, and I can just tell you those are completely different worlds. So I will say the church is the same way, that there's so much diversity and so much disparity within the church world. Absolutely, it's not monolithic here, but there are some who I think have stepped away from that understanding, or maybe they operate with a different understanding. And I don't judge that. I don't have anything to say for or against it. I just know that what we strive to embody in New Life, and what I believe that we're called to do as a practitioner of our faith, is to embody the beliefs and embody God's people and be present with God's people. And so where people are, that's where we are.
I agree with you. And I will remember that, it's the people, not the place, and that's the biggest message, that really dawned on me. And, I definitely uplift you guys for, addressing and helping cure food insecurity, because, that still is at an all-time high. And, I recently learned about you guys Feed 5,000 program, but it seems like such a great thing. And, I'm glad you guys are doing it at my old elementary school.
Hey,
of course, yes, that's my old elementary school. And, I was there this week for Teacher Appreciation Week, appreciating them. There wasn't old teachers there, right? Like it had been some time ago. But it was definitely good to go back. And it was funny to see that the school was a lot smaller than I remembered it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that tends to happen.
Yes. But, there's great community churches like you guys. I know Living Hope has been helping out with food, ICCL, and what is it, Grace to Grace with the Charisma Food Bank. So we've had so many churches step up and continue to give food. I think that some people believe since the pandemic has ended, you know, that like things are okay, right? There's still a lot of people recovering and, you know, not okay. And so, you know, definitely, you know, appreciate you guys. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, I was curious, was, you know, how are you growing your congregation?
Yeah.
It definitely seems like an organic message and, you know, non-judgmental, but, you know, and from your perspective, how are you growing your congregation? And, you know, what is the size of your congregation at this point?
Yeah, no,
Active?
that's a good question. I mean, we've experienced pretty rapid growth, so that's a huge blessing, and give God really glory and credit for it. We in just a couple of years we've eclipsed and just passed the 500 person mark. So we're a congregation that's moving towards about 600 people in terms of active membership.
Wow.
We're grateful for that, and the growth has really been organic. I mean, we just try to teach and preach with transparency, and with honesty. One of the things that I'm always mindful of is who it is that we're trying to reach. And I believe that we're really not simply going after those who already are in church, but we're trying to share the message of God's grace and God's love in a way that it will tickle the ear of those who are not in church as well, so that when they come, they don't feel judged. They feel again that the message that they're hearing and the experience that they're having is one that's intelligible and approachable for them, even if they didn't grow up knowing all the hymns and knowing all the songs. We try to be welcoming and loving. I know these are things. This is kind of really simple, but it's true. We try to really be welcoming. When you come to the parking lot, you see people literally waving and greeting you and saying, "Welcome to New Life. We're happy to have you here." As soon as you walk in the door, you're being greeted by people of different generations who are just there to love, there to offer support, and there to make folks feel welcome. And I think that goes a long way. We're really fortunate, even in terms of where we worship. We worship at the Laurel Beltsville Senior Activity Center. So we're literally plugged right into the community, even in terms of our place of worship. And that's been phenomenal because it allows us to naturally intersect with folks who are coming and folks who are going, and to make meaningful relationship there. And by the grace of God, the church really has grown organically. We also, I'll tell you, we don't sanitize scripture at our church. So preaching it tends to be raw. And as a person who was not always in church myself personally, I was not always living what it is that I preach now. I came to faith a little bit later in life in terms of lived experience. I grew up going to church. I want to make sure I say that because my mom will smack me upside my head if I give any other kind of a story. But I would say that, like many who grew up being made to go to church with their parents, when I became an adult, I continued to go, but I was not trying to live the life that I was being taught to live when I was going. That was something that happened for me later in life. And so the majority of my friends and my closest, even family members, aren't in church. And so when I'm preaching and when I'm teaching, I'm always thinking, would this message reach them? Would they feel welcomed here? Are we behaving in a way that one of my boys or one of my friends from home could come, no matter what they're going through in life, and feel welcomed and not feel judged in an authentic way? I think it's one thing to say, "Come as you are." It's another thing to actually live it out, because people say that in churches all the time. But then if you really come as you are, sometimes people turn their nose up at you. And we've really fought hard to make sure that that's not a part of the culture here. Culture matters. People feel culture. People taste culture. And
Yes.
culture is healthy and it's inviting. People want to come. And I truly still believe that the best form of marketing and advertising continues to be word of mouth. And so, by the grace of God, I think we've grown because people have had good experiences and shared their experiences with others. And so, yeah, we actually haven't spent a dime on radio, TV, or print. We've just been doing it the old way. Yeah.
Wow. Hey, kudos to you guys. And I hope you guys keep on growing. And, I'll definitely be there to check you guys out personally soon. And, I think one of the things you brought up that was key was the fact that the church was very critical to the civil rights movement, right? A lot of people, forget that, in front of Martin Luther King Jr.'s name is Reverend, right? So, I think he was a reverend, his father was a reverend, right? So there's a lot of people that in the civil rights movement that were, in the church, and I think a lot of things that you kind of said is the church is community, right? So if the church is behind something, the community is going to be behind it. There's going to be a strong presence behind it, and so that's why politicians they don't want to piss off the church,
Yep.
right? Whether it
Yep.
be the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, they the Islamic Church, they don't want to piss off the church, right? Like, because they know that there's going to be a lot of committed individuals speaking out against this, and so I think that's one of the key things that you mentioned. And you mentioned the rent stabilization fight, but there's also another fight that has been undergone we've been undergoing in the city, and that's been collective bargaining. And that is a fight that, of course, in the civil rights time, you remember the Poor People's Campaign, and you remember the
Absolutely.
sanitation workers, fighting basically to unionize and make sure that they had the proper protections, proper pay, and that's something similar. And I think I expressed in Laurel, we had a public worker who was killed while on the job.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, it is wild, like, because there's some people who remember, there's some people who don't. And I think the first thing is, some people ask, well, like, how? We're like, how? It's a dangerous job. So a lot of times when you're on the road, you're speeding kind of past them. When you're trying to get around them, you might not notice they're picking up trash. And it was a tragic situation that actually happened. But outside of that, it was the workers, like, all of them standing together. Like, of course, years of this happened, some of those individuals weren't standing together, weren't even here, but they know that they want a better life. And I think one of the important things that you said is kind of like, uh, during COVID, a lot of people have been pinned against the wall economically. And so, some people have been choosing to go without the bare things that they need, the bare necessities, right? Like choosing between their medicine. And so, as someone who is a public official, I'll always champion workers' rights. You know, Definitely someone to and I'm sure you guys are supportive. I remember I was talking to the pastor at New Haven Church, right there. I call it the White Building. Are you familiar with New Haven?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
familiar. I don't know the pastor personally, but familiar with the church.
Yeah, so I told the pastor, I said, hey, the sanitation and recycling and, the construction workers in the city, they're trying to unionize. He said, what? He said, you got a petition? Give me a paper. I gave him a paper. He came back out and it was like 20 signatures on it. So that's the power of the church. He literally just went in the room and said, guys, this is what's happening. And boom, 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 come out with 20 signatures. So that right there, tying it back in to, like, that is the power in the church, right? Like the church can be powerful. The church, can move boulders, especially when they are, fighting for things in the community, like you
Yeah.
guys are, always doing. And so I
Yeah.
appreciate you guys.
Yeah. No, and it's good, man. I mean, I think that the partnership between those who operate squarely in the political arena and those of us who operate in these faith-based places, those partnerships are critical, because without the partnerships, there's not shared awareness. And,
Sure.
and it needs to really flow both ways. It needs to be like a porous membrane, because what can happen is, as a politician, as someone who's working in the political arena, you're aware of things that's coming down the pipe. You're aware of issues that constituents are bringing your way. You're aware of things that are originating in the political sphere that we need to be aware of, because they're going to impact the people that we feel called to serve, right? And then it also is the same for us, because we are ideally, I always say, as a pastor, you should smell like the sheep. You should not, you shouldn't have a situation where there's a pastor who looks nothing like the people who that individual actually serves. Yes, there's so much distance between you and the
I mean,
sheep that you don't even know what their problems are. You don't know what they're dealing with when they go to sleep, because you ain't sleeping in the same place, you ain't eating the same things, you're not living the same life. Pastors ought to be that ought to smell like the sheep. In fact, that metaphor for being a pastor or as a shepherd originated during a time period in which shepherds did not have white picket fences. Wherever sheep went, the shepherd would have to go. They traveled constantly. They had to live in the same places, fight off the same predators, fight for the same things. And that kind of a connection, what it does is allow the shepherd to be mindful of the issues that are affecting those that individual is called to serve, protect, and lead. And when that happens, then in the same way that those things that originate in the political arena are those that you can bring our way to create awareness, we can also bubble things back up to you. And now something powerful can take place when we lock arms. And I really think that we saw that. We made reference to it before, but we saw that on display in our country during the civil rights movement in the 60s. That's exactly how things moved. And
Absolutely.
as we continue to do so today, there are different issues that we still need to be championing and fighting for, but we got to lock arms in solidarity. We may not be able to do so on every issue, but we need to do some on the issues that are really core to the rights and the liberty that people deserve to have.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, one of the last major topics I wanted to bring up was we're in the state of Maryland. Maryland became the 21st state to legalize cannabis, so it's in my nickname, the Cannabis Councilman. And, just for people out there, I'm a medical patient and an advocate. And, a lot of what I speak about is, ending the stigma around cannabis, and especially being able to look at it as medicine. And even if people, are not consuming it medically, therapeutic or recreational use. But the biggest thing I always say is responsible adult use, right? Because I wanted to, get out the notion that I'm encouraging, non-adults or anybody else to, utilize the plant. And so, we have become a legalized state July 1st of 2023. Will be legalized. It's already been decriminalized. And so I'm sure there's been a lot of a conversation in your congregation around, what this looks like. And so, kind of what has been the response, and I guess how do you respond initially, to the concerns, to the, whatever it might be around it. So.
No, this is a great topic. So I'm actually also I'm a board member of the Collective Empowerment Group, which is located in Prince George's County. It's a collection of both pastors and leaders in finance, a number of different arenas who come together to share ideas and to work towards common goals around economic empowerment. We actually just had a roundtable discussion. We had Delegate Nicole Williams and Delegate Harrison with us, just talking about this issue specifically, and really finding out more about it. I would actually say, I know that this is not something that is popular amongst all clergy. I'm for responsible legalization that is connected to exoneration and is connected to the end of incarceration for those who have been previously charged and are currently being held behind bars for cannabis-related offenses. I am for it. I believe that the war on drugs that began under Reagan, that was ramped up under Clinton, was one that was unfairly targeting brown and black people in this country. I believe that many of the stigmas around cannabis use have been focused on the black community, although we know that none of the research supports it, and that cannabis is being used in many other communities at higher rates than it even is within the black community. I also want to make sure that it is done in a responsible way that's protective. I'm glad to hear you say, yeah, we're talking about adult use here. I was happy to hear that this is 21 years of age or older. I think we need to make sure that now that these bills have passed, now that it is legal, that in this process of putting certain policy issues in place, that we're doing certain things. We need to make sure that we're protecting public spaces where children are, schools and playgrounds, right?
Yeah,
parks. We got to be mindful of those things. I'm very concerned, Councilman, with making sure that the same poaching, in my opinion, that took place with the black community and liquor stores does not happen with smoke shops, that we don't just see smoke shops popping up in black communities in abundance in the same way that we saw liquor stores do. I'm also very, 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 very concerned to ensure that those persons who are Black and brown are not don't find an impediment to getting into the industry, not just from a consumer standpoint, but also from other avenues. And I'm concerned that some of the pricing, some of the licensing is put at a price point that's so high that it makes it challenging for anyone who is Black or brown who has certain economic struggles to get into the industry as anything but a consumer. And so as it pertains to being able to be in manufacturing, whether it's farming, I don't know what those other aspects of the industry are. I'm not
ancillary delivery, yes.
Absolutely. I'm not a huge student of it, but in that regard, but I just want to make sure that we are not excluded from being able to get in ways that could be economically beneficial for those persons in the community who do want to be a part. And that opinion is my view is not one that I know is shared by everyone. And so I don't judge anybody who has a different view and a different opinion. But I also want to say this, lastly, I understand the medical value of cannabis as well. And I think that that's something that we really, really have to talk about in a real way. My wife is a leukemia survivor. And when we were going through that process, we wanted to look at everything that could help my wife survive and stay alive. And that was one of the conversations that came up during that time. I also know that there's a huge push and there's been demonstrative research to support cannabis as a tool that can be used to curtail and fight off this horrific opioid crisis that's been taking place in this country as well. PTSD, folks who are suffering from various forms of epilepsy. So much work needs to be done around what this plant can be used to do. And I do believe that there's a huge stigma attached. I do believe that there's a lot of negative energy being poured into the conversation from the outside based on some experiences that people have had. And I don't judge anyone for having a different opinion, but I'm actually grateful that we're moving in the direction that we appear to be moving in, because I hate to believe that there are as many people still behind bars throughout our country for what's related offenses. It's mind blowing to me. It really is.
And so you said a bunch of great things. I'm gonna make sure to check out the Collective Empowerment Group. But you said a bunch of great things. One was that, what I felt was an afterthought for a lot of people is the fact that the restorative justice, right, and the decarceration, right, and as you said, that I wanted to make sure that no one was charged for cannabis moving forward, and the people who were charged, their charges are automatically expunged or they're resentenced, especially if cannabis was their only charge. That cannabis charge, they can get resentenced for that cannabis charge. And I think that one of the other important things that you basically said was making sure that people that are in that community, whether it be an impacted community or not, they actually have an opportunity to thrive in that business, whether it be a dispensary, whether it be a cultivator, whether it be a processor, whether it be a delivery driver, whether it be a marketer, whatever actual lane, so you want to make sure that the people that are in that community can actually benefit, right? So not people coming from outside of that community, setting up shop and, basically just benefiting off of that community.
Absolutely. That's called poaching.
Yes, especially a community that's already been impacted, and one of the things you said, by a failed war on drugs, but it was successful. One of the things that they mentioned later on is that it worked exactly how it was designed, right? So
wow.
It was a successful war on drugs. But, one of the other things I would say is, you mentioned opioids, and that's one of the things I mention a lot. And not just opioids, but also you mentioned being safe as a parent, right? Like if you were a parent and being responsible. I think that a parent should have a stash box, right? That there has a lock on it, and the kids couldn't get into. The same thing with their opioids, right? Like we've heard of teenagers getting into their parents' pill cabinet. And so these same things should be locked away, just like if you have a firearm, right? If you're someone who legally bears arms, you should definitely be safeguarding that from your kids.
Absolutely.
And yes, exactly. So that's some things definitely as a responsible parent. But especially in relation to opioids, I've seen people decrease their prescription in opioids because they're a medical patient now, right? So as we know, there's an opioid problem. The city, has been involved in joining the lawsuit against opioid manufacturers, right? You've heard about that federal lawsuit, and so we know that opioids are problematic.
Yeah.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you was, I've heard of, like, I don't know if you know much about it, but other religions that have used like cannabis and like spirituality, like especially like Indian or like Southeast Asian, religions, and so I know it's not necessarily entrenched in America, and what we were doing here, but I have seen, other cultures and other religions where it's more like ingrained
Yeah.
and not stigmatized necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of work done on the ways that in parts of the indigenous peoples have used mushrooms. Indigenous peoples have used various types of plants as a part of their religious practice. I've never experienced that in any form, and so I'm not as well versed in that as I would like to be to really speak on it. But I am aware that is something that happens in many parts of the world.
Yes.
In fact, psychedelics in various forms have been used. Cannabis is not a psychedelic, but psychedelics in various forms have been used for religious practices for a very, very long time.
Yes.
And so that there are connections that are deeply there. I cannot point to any directly within
Yes.
Christendom. I can point to wine all over the place, but I cannot directly point to cannabis use. But I really believe honestly that there is a stigma that's attached to use of the plant, because, to use your point, the war on drugs was effective. It did what it was supposed to do. And the fact that we have put cannabis in the same category as heroin is absolutely mind-blowing. Just like you, I would be not truthful if I told you that there are persons, I've had persons, not just in our church, but persons in other churches that I've spoken to who have had questions because they found that cannabis was a healthy health treatment for various ailments. Whether they were using a cream that they could rub on, whether they were using CBD, whether they were using forms that contain THC, they were struggling with the fact that this is something that's been helpful for them medically. They have not been able to find anything else that could help, but they've been told and raised to believe that it's taboo and that you do not touch. I can't find anywhere in scripture that points towards cannabis, but I also cannot find anywhere in scripture that points away from cannabis. And so for me, I've always encouraged people to consult their doctors. And if a medical professional is saying that this is something that can contribute towards their healing, to use it responsibly in the same way that you would use anything else. So I think that we do have to do a lot of work. My prayer and my hope is that as we declassify this plant and put it in the hands of scientists and professionals, we can do the types of research that's needed to find out more about its usage and find out more about ways that it can be constructively engaged. So yeah, I'm for responsible legalization that's tied to exoneration and the end to incarceration. I want to see Black and brown people get out of cells, man, and not be hemmed up for cannabis charges.
Absolutely. As I said when I was, speaking on the trail for legalization, no legalization without full decarceration of, nonviolent cannabis prisoners.
Absolutely.
Everybody should have the opportunity to thrive.
Yep.
And so, I appreciate the empathy you have, and of course, the way you talk about the topic, because it is different than a lot of a lot of clergy, right? So a lot of them can be very stuck in their ways and traditional. But you mentioned a lot of positive things that we can have discussion on. And so I wanted to ask you a few rapid questions before I got you out of here.
Yep.
And the
Don't
first,
beat me up. Don't beat me up too bad.
no, well, the rapid ones are, they're you don't got to think. Favorite quote, and you are a pastor, so you got a quote or a bunch of them, I'm
Oh
sure.
man, favorite quote. I don't even know if I have like a favorite quote. I think, man,
See, I say fall down 8 times, get up 9.
yeah,
Simple.
I know. Man, I think that we ought to be a people who are always lifting as we climb. I was just talking to somebody about that today. I think we should be lifting as we climb. Once you get up, reach back down, pull somebody else up, lifting as we climb. We should be lifting as we climb.
Pay it forward. I like to say pay it forward. When people try to pay it forward. Okay.
Yep.
So the next thing is favorite superhero and why?
Favorite superhero. That is a phenomenal question. Sometimes my wife asks me, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? I think I really that's a good question.
Yeah,
I like the Flash, man. I like that super speed. There's parts of me that will sometimes want to fly, but I like the Flash, man. I like his speed. I like what he can do, but I have to say, above all, and I mean, I'm just gonna be honest, it's the one that I can identify with most. I mean, I really am Wakanda forever, man. I'm a Black Panther at this point in my life, so yeah, man. I just gotta go. I gotta go there.
Hey, my kids love it. I love it. So I'll give you that one. And the last thing, very simple. You can tell a lot about a person from this one. Coke or Pepsi.
Oh man, neither. I think that we gotta stop drinking soda, man. Look, I'm so against soda.
I agree.
If I came to your office and I saw you drinking a soda, I would be like, man, you might as well run around and play in traffic. What are you doing? This thing is created to destroy your body. It's like it's all this negative. It's not even a real drink. It's not. What is it? What is it? what I mean?
You're right. But okay. So no Pepsi or Coke. Probably water, right?
Right. Probably water.
And water is the best for you.
Water. Look, you can do water. You can do juice. You can go to I don't know if we have one in Laurel yet, but you can go to a mom's grocery store and get you some kind of natural ginger ale. But my gosh, no soda, man. There, geez Louise, we gotta, our people, man. Like high blood pressure and all of these things. Like stay away, diabetes. Stay away from soda.
You're not lying. They call them what? Empty calories.
I'm telling you, bro.
And so tell people how they can stay in touch with you. Of course, it's been a pleasure, and I'll definitely see you in the community and look forward to working with you and your church.
Yeah, no, man, we would love to have you guys come by and find out more about us. Our website is newlifenation.org, newlifenation.org. We worship on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. at the Laurel Beltsville Senior Activity Center, 7120 Conti Road in Laurel, Maryland. You can also follow me personally on Instagram. Rev Omari Hughes is my handle on Facebook and on Instagram. And our church is the same at New Life, Laurel at New Life on Instagram and on Facebook. So we would love to have you guys follow us and love to see you whenever time allows.
Hey, so definitely reach out to New Life and definitely reach out to Reverend Hughes. I look forward to seeing you. And, as you can see, he's very down to earth, very humble and very, very welcome and very inviting. So don't be scared, to check out, his church or engage with him. So I appreciate you again.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Bless you.
Yeah. See you soon.
All right.
Everybody, that was a very special guest. Actually, someone in the Laurel area, right? We always have guests from different areas, and I hope you appreciated that conversation. It was a diverse conversation. We covered a lot of different topics, and look forward to seeing you soon. Don't forget, mind your business and drink your water.